Hi book friends! I am definitely a stats girl. Like, I really love stats. So I'm gonna go over my reading stats of 2025 and any notices that I have at the end. We'll kind of have a little bit of a chat about it. So I am using mostly Cassidy from Covers with Cassidy, her spreadsheet, because I input everything and I know that everything is accurate. I also do Goodreads, but Goodreads doesn't have a ton of stats. And I'm gonna look at Storygraph at the very end to see if they share anything that like I think is really different and really unique. But mostly all of the stats that I see are pretty much from Cassidy's spreadsheet, and I really have started tracking my reading about like 4 years ago with spreadsheets, and I have really liked that experience. So yeah, let's get into it. I read on average 217 books overall. I think, did I do all of them? Did I include all of them on here? I think I did. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I definitely think I did. Yeah, I think I definitely did. If not, I'm pretty close to having them all. Yeah. Okay. I think I missed one book. All right. You know what? Hold on a second. Let me go put that book in because it's gonna bother me, and then I'll come back and then we'll have our chat. Okay, I am back. I definitely have missed a book at some point, but I did read 217 books according to Goodreads. So according to this stat, I read 19 books in January, which I always try to start off that month going strong, and then I read 17 books in February. I read 19 books in March. March is always a big month because that is Ramadan for Covers with Cassidy. And then April, I read 12 books. April was a bit of a rough month. A lot happened in March, so it was definitely my lowest reading month. It was only 12. I read 20. 10 again was a rougher reading month because my show went up and we had a lot of personal stuff going on. So 12 and 10 is probably my lowest reads of the entire year. So April and May were pretty tough. I read 25 in June because that was the amazing readathon. That is the most I have read all year. 17 in July, 19th in August, 13 in September. Going back to work, I always drop considerably. And then October I read 22, November I read 22, and December I read 21. So yeah. And that is how many books I read each month. And then the next stat I'm going to go over is January. I read 6,487 pages. And then February I read 599 pages. March I read 568. April I read 4,396. Yeah, I'm not going to go over them all, but my highest page count was December. I read 7,646. And my lowest page count was in May. I only read 4,111. And then my highest page count was 7,646 in December. So yeah. And I read 6,999, and I had average page count was 322 for books, which is my average page count normally. And then genres, I have read my most read genre of 5 stars is always going to be romance, but I will say in this spreadsheet I did split up my fantasy like in various genres, so it may have been a bit off. But I read 17 fantasy romance. I read 1 sci-fi, 2 manga, 7 short story, 15 YA contemporary, 35 mystery, 7 contemporary, 24 YA fantasy, 8 middle grade fantasy, 19 graphic novels. I read 49 romances, 4 historical romances, 3 thrillers, 22 regular fantasy, and yeah, 17 fantasy romance. Yeah, so that is a pretty good chunk. Again, I will say it's probably an even split between fantasy and romance, but they're just separated on the spreadsheet. I'm not going to do that next year, but that's what I did this year. And then book size, I read 98 medium books, 38 large books, 9 chunky, and 71 small. And I think that my kind of determination is if it's small, it's less than 300 pages. Medium is like 300 to 400. Chunky, large is like 400 to 500, and chunky is like 600 and above. So yeah. And then publication date is always an interesting stat. I read 43 new release, 43 from last year, 115 new releases, and 57 backlist. So, and I read 19 books mixed media. That has definitely happened as we went on. I read 34 ebook, not enough, I'll be very honest, and then 86 audiobooks and 77 physical. And then format acquired, I read 25 books from KU, 10 books from NetGalley, 5 from Spotify, 32 from the library, 72 owned, 28 ARC, 34 from Audible, 10 from Everand, and yeah, that is all that I did with that. And then the parent publishers I always find so interesting. I read 17 indie books this year, which is actually pretty good for me. I read 17 from Hachette, 6 from Simon & Schuster, 15 from Macmillan, and 45 from Penguin. Penguin is always my biggest genre, and that's like, I don't know why, but they have always been my biggest genre. I really like the authors that are with Penguin, so that's not a big shocker. And yeah, I read 17 books from Berkeley, which is the Penguin romance imprint, and then the other biggest publisher was self-published 12. And then Del Rey is 5. So yeah, those are the small publisher graphics that I came up with. And then I also had star ratings. I had 104 4 stars, 51 5 stars, only 5 2 stars, 52 3 stars, and yeah, that's about it. And then we have a series versus standalone breakdown, which I always find super interesting. And then I read 86 book in series. I read 4 anthologies. I read 73 standalones and 51 companions. And I also started 60 series, continued in 40 mine, finished 17. Series of publication is 27. Series DNF is 10. And series still working on is 136, which is not great. But we're working on it, I promise. And then representation, I read 191 books by women, and I read 15 by men, 1 by multiple, and I read 30% of my books in representation, and 42 of them were new authors. Yeah, Cassie's genres didn't really work for me because I was trying to, like, keep track of how many fantasy books I was reading. So really the only books that, like, were romance, and that was 17. But yeah, so yeah, and that's all of my stats. Yeah, so I don't know, I just think the stats are interesting. The one thing I think that I sort of realized, and I think I'm gonna change, is I'm gonna try really hard when I pick up a book to try to make it a fantasy book, because I love fantasy so much. And I think what happens is, especially when I'm in the mood of doing readathons, I tend to feel like all of my prompt books need to be physical reads, which is not true. And I think that I have been discounting audiobooks in my own head for some reason, so I want to change that. I want to definitely find more time to read audiobooks, so I just have to, like, I get into, like, weird habits where I'm, like, listening to things over and over and over again. I need to just stop doing that. So yeah, that is something I also noticed. And another thing that I noticed is I want to get better at reading series. The last couple of weeks of the month, I really read mostly all of my series books, and I loved it. So I might make that a challenge every couple of months, maybe like once every quarter, to do that, because it kind of, like, flushes my palate a little bit, because I do like the characters so much. So yeah, let me know what are some of the stats that you were interested in this year, and did any stats fascinate you? I would love to know, and I'll talk to you guys later.